5 Live Formula One.
Well, it's 2 for 2 for Lando Norris as he wins for McLaren at the Dutch Grand Prix. And congratulations also to Kimi Antonelli, who extends his lead at the top of the championship to 59 points. I'm Jenny Gow, and I'm joined by Kai Buccini, our lead commentator this weekend, and Mark Priestley. Hello, guys. Thank you for joining me. I have to say, Mark, that was some race. I mean, it was all over the place. They say Zandvoort is a bit boring. Not this time.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to yesterday and look at the sprint, which was, if we're honest, a little bit dull, this was nothing like that. It was chaos from start to finish, beginning with the heavens opening just before the race started. So the grid was utterly soaked with rain, very, very wet, but then it stopped. So the teams are faced with this tough decision, which tyres do we start the race on? Because half the track was wet, half was dry. They all opted to go on the slick tyres, a mixture of softs and mediums. And when they got up to speed and got for their first racing lap, it was Max Verstappen, the home hero of all people, who made an uncharacteristic mistake. Stuck a wheel on the white line, spun the rear tyres up, stuck it in the wall, and the debris was everywhere. That brought out red flags. There's another set of decisions for the teams to make. What do we do now? Because the circuit's now drying. So it's strategic decisions all the way through the day. Lando Norris got off the line quickest from the restart, and that was a real key moment in his race. Kimi Antonelli as well with a really good start. But it was later on in the race, for me, it was the key strategic decision. They had to make pit stops because the tyres weren't lasting anywhere near as long as they thought. The original one-stop plan sort of went out the window. But Kimi Antonelli got a free pit stop. He made his pit stop a little bit earlier than Lando Norris. Those two were racing out front. I think the key moment was Lando Norris staying out for an extra 7 or 8 laps, I think it was, out in front on his own while everyone else was making their stops. And that 7-lap offset towards the end of the race, when he then finally did make his pit stop and put a fresh set of tyres on, his car came alive and he was closing down the gaps to Kimi Antonelli, who was currently in second at the time, closing him down by 2-3 seconds a lap for a few laps' time. They caught up with Lewis Hamilton, who was the de facto leader at that point, made easy work of those two and got past. And I think from that point on, Lando Norris walked away with that Grand Prix, built himself a lead that Kimi Antonelli, even once he got past Lewis Hamilton, had nothing to match the pace, the ultimate pace of the McLaren in the hands of Lando Norris. So that is, as you said, 2 races in a row now. The upgrades working on that McLaren car, but strategically, I think they also did a really good job.
So it finished Lando Norris in first place, then Kimi Antonelli and George Russell holding off the 2 Ferraris and Kai. It was even hard to keep up on track with who was leading at what point because of all the different pit stops and strategies. As Mark says, it was a complicated one for your first one. We thought we'd, baptise you properly.
Well, why not? Throw me straight in at the deep end. I think that's all exactly what we wanted, was an interesting Zandvoort, a good sign-off to Zandvoort as well, to showcase what Zandvoort is capable of and what we've had over the years at this circuit as well. There were so many points in the race. I think it was a race of 3 stages where at one point we thought Antonelli was going to walk away with the win. Then we thought that Hamilton might have a chance of taking home the victory. And as you mentioned, Mark, then it was Lando Norris who came back straight in after the pit stops at the back end and was able to take a commanding victory. Wasn't an easy one, though. Continues the stat at Zandvoort of every race winner in the modern era coming from pole position, but he had to work very hard for that one.
I know that story doesn't really tell the full picture
Not
at all.
Yeah.
And I think there will be some very happy people, there'll be some people annoyed with themselves. And the first man, I suppose, which will be annoyed with himself is George Russell.
Yeah, I think so. And actually he's had a really strong weekend up until Grand Prix day, hasn't he? Because he would put himself on pole for the sprint on Friday. He then won that sprint, got the 8 points that came with that, which is really good for his championship fight and a really good way to come back from the summer break, boosting his confidence. But as soon as we got onto the race start, the Grand Prix start, he found himself on the slightly wetter side of the racetrack. That was his grid position, and he just didn't get away at all. He got loads of wheel spin. He got swallowed up by his teammate in the first start of the initial start of the Grand Prix. And unfortunately, from there on, he was always chasing down Kimi. He was always second fiddle to this young guy, Kimi Antonelli, who's dominating the championship. And those are the moments that I think will get into George's head, because it's another Grand Prix weekend where he's effectively been outplayed by his younger teammate.
Well, we'll talk plenty more about George Russell going forward and Kimi Antonelli, but the star of the show has to be Lando Norris. back-to-back wins. McLaren was nowhere, but all of a sudden they've found form. And Mark, for you, that must be nice to look back at because you were there for such a long time.
Yeah, I'm
not calling you biased, but
no, I'm happy to take the fact I'm totally biased. I'm a huge McLaren fan and always will be. And because I know so many people there, it's so nice to see them having the success that they're having. Of course, world champions last year, that was a huge feather in the cap. They didn't come out the blocks as quickly as Mercedes clearly did at the start of this season. So it's been a game of catch-up, but they are a very good team at developing. And what we saw at the last round before the summer break in Hungary was a big development. So the car clearly worked and brought performance. We saw Lando Norris win that race, and they've carried that forward. So they've now got a car that's definitely in the conversation at most Grand Prix. It's got different strengths and weaknesses to the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari. So some circuits will suit them, whereas others maybe not so much. But on a day like today, where it was utter chaos and it was about thinking on your feet and getting it right, the team from the pit wall did just as good a job as the guy sitting behind the wheel in the car.
What? I don't think that was anything that was a surprise. Coming off the back of qualifying, when we heard from Lando Norris on Saturday evening, he felt that in that mid-section of the circuit through the second sector, where you need to be most committed, where you need to carry the most rolling speed as well, and need to be precise as a driver, Norris felt that he was able to carry most speed out of anyone out on the track in his McLaren car. He said whether that be down to the machine that's underneath him or his personal confidence, that was up for debate, but either way, it was a combination of the two that got him the race victory.
Yeah, but I also think that I don't think he necessarily had the fastest car at all times in the race today. And when you can win a Grand Prix without having a dominant car or even the fastest car, those are the moments that really, decide championships. So they played it right. They got onto the right tyre at the right time in the Grand Prix. So he had the performance when he needed it most. And it was at the end of that race, like I said, where he was able to chase down Kimi Antonelli and a sort of struggling by that point Lewis Hamilton to get past and use the opportunity and use the performance to disappear off into the distance. So those decisions were absolutely key to getting this race victory today. So there'll be races when they will dominate. I think Hungary was one of those. I don't think they necessarily could say they dominated this weekend, but they've come out with the big haul of points.
So a good combination win from driver and team working together to take those points. And we asked, didn't we, off the back of Hungary, was this a freak standout track that just lent in their favour? But actually, two on the bounce, Kai, I think, what's the future for them now? We don't know the end of the season and exactly how it's going to play out in terms of where we're even going to go. But it's got to be a good start.
I think Hungary was a big step forwards for McLaren. Obviously, they came into the Hungaroring weekend with a haul of upgrades onto the car, and it was either going to be make or break for the back end of that first half of the season to see where McLaren's standpoint was and where they would come back after the summer break, after those 4 weeks off. So obviously, nothing has changed to any of the other cars. They're not allowed to develop anything over that summer break. So I think it was a great confidence booster for the team that they brought in those upgrades in Hungary and seen that it's made a difference to the performance of the cars and the performance of the drivers. Piastri and Norris both clearly feeling more confident and more comfortable in their machinery. I think this is going to be a new McLaren that we're going to see for the second half of the season.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think their biggest problem, though, is that big points lead that Kimi Antonelli and Mercedes have built up at the first part of the year. And the reason that's a problem is they built that lead at a brand new point in Formula One's, evolution, right? Brand new set of cars, new technology, new rules, all the rest of it. People were struggling to find their feet at the beginning of this season, yet Mercedes came out the blocks firing, and they've capitalised on that. So the point about that I'm trying to make here is he made all of that points advantage when others were really struggling, and so he took big chunks on everybody. Lando, for the first few races, absolutely nowhere. So there was a mix of different people chasing up behind the Mercedes. Now what you've got is everybody incrementally creeping forward. We've seen a big step from McLaren, big step from Ferrari. Even if Lando goes on to dominate the second half of this season, you can probably bet your bottom dollar Kimi Antonelli's not going to be far behind. So he's only going to be taking small chunks each race out of that big points lead that he's built in the first half.
And what I find interesting is that while Lando is performing really well in that car, Piastri isn't getting quite the same out of it. And certainly these cars, they seem very sensitive to the driving style and how quickly you can change your style to adapt to these new categories and new regulations.
I think that's massive for this year. I think you've seen a number of drivers that we know are really good drivers struggle. I think you can probably look at George Russell a little bit compared to Kimi Antonelli. the reverse, you could easily argue for Lewis Hamilton in the last era of Formula One. We know he's a talent, he's a 7-time world champion, but yet with the ground effect cars, he went missing for a few years pretty much, didn't he? He's now found his feet. This era of car seems to suit the driving style of Lewis Hamilton, but Kimi Antonelli is at one with these cars and an unstoppable force. But I think you're right. Lando Norris seems also to be working really well with that McLaren. Oscar Piastri, I think today really struggled more than most people.
So let's hear from Lando Norris, our race winner.
Well, Lando, congratulations. You had a lot thrown at you, some pre-race rain, then you had the restart from pole, and then you had whether or not you'd pitted for the FESC, and you got there in the end. How satisfying is that?
It was a tough race. It was a tough race just because of some decisions you have to make along the way and the stress that things cause. Not having a great start for whatever reason. So we need to review, of course, some things. To be honest, a lot of yesterday and today as well, the right side of the grid seemed to be better starters than the left for some reason. And this is what we learned from yesterday, and it was clear again today. So we need to understand why. But of course, we needed to do a better job, and I need to review what I could have done better, because that just puts me in a very, very difficult position for the rest of the day. But apart from that, the first stint was not good. The second two stints incredibly strong, and I drove a very good race from a stint perspective, from tyre management perspective, which was our weakness yesterday, was our strength today. So very, very pleased that we managed to turn a lot of things around.
Back-to-back wins, back-to-back upgrades. Does it feel like you're back in it?
No, I think if you say that, you're just too short-sighted for the time being. Of course, we look ahead to the end of the season and we want to make sure we're in the best place possible. And in some ways, we are short-sighted too, because we want to just look to the next race. We don't want to look any further than that. But there's no point thinking anything more than just next job is to prepare for Monza and do the best job we can there. So, we have a lot of work to do. I'm not happy with the car. I get that. I get that people are going to go, well, you just won 2 races and you're on pole in 2 races, but I know what my car is. I know where we're strong, where we're weak. I know the job I'm doing. And I know we really need to improve in some places. If I want to repeat that line that we still have a chance for the championship, I can't repeat that until I'm confident in it. And at the minute, we need a little bit more still. So,
all right, well, congrats and still enjoy that win.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
So Lando Norris might have won the race, but the biggest winner, I think, this weekend was Kimi Antonelli. He extends his lead at the top of the championship to 59 points over George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. They're both tied on 183 points compared to 242 for Kimi Antonelli. He had a good weekend, didn't he?
He really did. Antonelli was strong. He was there or thereabouts across the weekend. I wouldn't say he's as dominant as we've seen him in this first half of the season. At no point did it really look like it was Antonelli's race and everyone was chasing him for it. On the sprint on Friday and Saturday, it almost looked as if it was a completely different question. It was all George Russell. He was dominating in the Mercedes. And then when it came to Grand Prix Sunday, that's when we know Antonelli's the strongest. The script was completely flipped on its head as well. And that is when Antonelli came out to shine.
I'd say that exactly that. That he had a good Sunday rather than a good weekend. But of course, Sunday is where the big haul of points are dished out.
For me, psychologically, it was that moment when Kimi Antonelli was allowed past George Russell in the pit lane under the safety car when the red flag came out. And at that moment, psychologically, you can imagine George Russell's fought so hard to get on the front row and beat his teammate. And then all of a sudden, he has to cede that position in the pit lane when they're reorganising from the red flag. And he just goes, oh, okay. And he never really got that back.
You say that, but that was fruit of his own labour. That was a mistake that he made on the circuit, and he needs to live with the consequences of that. Given Antonelli was able to be in the pit lane and look over the data from where Russell went wrong on his start for when he had to do the restart on the slippery side of the circuit. Yes, of course, it had dried up a little bit. It was a little bit easier for Antonelli off that second start, but it's never easy to jump the pole sitter at Zandvoort, and that's exactly what Antonelli did down into the first corner. Yes, Russell may have felt a little bit hard done by, but in the 722 laps that we had, at no stage could you really say that it was evident that Russell was the better driver.
And I think the even tougher blow, psychological blow for George Russell was later in the race. He was asked to move over again, wasn't he? There was a really interesting moment when, after all of the final pit stops had shaken out, George Russell came on the radio asking the team, look, I'm in second, Kimi's in third, he's out the picture now, so can we play a team game and effectively have Kimi Antonelli sort of back up the pack to give George a shot at the victory? As it turned out, and you called it exactly right in commentary, Jenny, the right team play here was the one that actually played out, and it was George Russell that was asked to move over because Kimi was the way faster guy on fresher tyres, and it was him they wanted to get through and have a shot at Lando Norris. In the end, he couldn't haul back. There's something like an 11-second lead, but George Russell was left fighting for his life with a chasing Lewis Hamilton behind him.
And over the radio on lap 67, he said, "We've lost a double podium here." Now, they didn't. But that was only really because that virtual safety car caused by the Williamses coming together. And I mean, it was a one-lap virtual safety car, that allowed Lewis Hamilton to not get in front, to give Russell, you could almost hear his breath going, oh, thank goodness. That was tight.
Yeah, it neutralised the attack from Hamilton. And from that stage, mentally, Hamilton then has to reset himself, get himself back into a racing mindset once the VSC had been taken off of the circuit, and then he can attack again. All of that momentum that he'd built up to that point was neutralised and thrown out of the window when the two Williams came together. Carlos Sainz being the Williams driver out of them that picks up the penalty for the collision. The number one rule of racing, don't collide with your teammate.
Yeah, it was the momentum that he lost, but also I think tyre temperature. Once you have to build up to an attack these days in Formula One, particularly on this circuit, and he'd been doing that for a few laps. Lewis Hamilton was closing on George Russell. You could see it coming. It was like a shark attack from a movie. It was definitely going to happen. And at the exact moment he was about to pull the trigger, the VSC was deployed. That neutralises things. They all have to slow down to a sort of a minimum delta time, and you lose tyre temperature. But at that point, there was like a lap and a half left of the Grand Prix. He didn't really have the time to start building things back up, get himself back into shape again to make the move. So George survived, but it was a tense few laps for him. Once George was asked by his team to let his faster young teammate through, he was in the clutches of Lewis for about 4 or 5 laps.
Well, let's hear from both Mercedes drivers, starting with Kimi Antonelli.
Hey, Kimi. Well, you drove so well today, and faced that race, I thought you were going to be fighting for the win. P2, so strong result. So what's the overarching emotion?
Yeah, a bit, disappointed because we've led, most at half of the race, but yeah, on that last stint on the hard, something just didn't feel right with the car. Just had really little confidence, and the pace was not there. So of course it's a shame because I really believed in it, but today was the end. P2 is the maximum that we could have done.
This was another weekend where I felt like you didn't feel super comfortable, but you somehow managed to grind out a really strong result. That must be really encouraging for you personally.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it was one of the weekends where I felt the least confident with the car overall. And but still, I think today what really saved us were the starts. 2 good starts, and managed to gain places in both. And at the end, we managed to finish P2, which is a great result for the team. Also, George did a great job. Was a great also team player today. Really happy with that, and now we look forward to Monza.
Great stuff. Congrats, Kimi. Thank you. George, it felt like a toughie from that start where you kind of dropped back and it kind of didn't really go your way thereafter. But what are the emotions? Because it's still a podium at the end of the day.
Yeah, emotions are they're fine, to be honest. I come away from this weekend as a whole satisfied. It's been my best weekend for quite a while, and I'll take those positives. I think that first VSC towards the end sort of came at a tough point because it gave Lewis that opportunity to get a free pit stop. Kimi was really struggling on the hard tyre, and I was catching him just before he got overtaken by Lando. So at that point in the race, I was like, I think P2 is on the cards here. And then, of course, we split the strategies at the end, and P3 was probably a fair result.
And from a confidence perspective, it's good again, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I think, as I said, considering that as a team we're not as dominant as we once were, this weekend I definitely would have taken the P1 yesterday, the P3 today. Wasn't a perfect race. The start wasn't great, and I lost the position. I was sleeping a bit with Piastri. Was on different energy deployments at the beginning, and didn't even look at my mirrors. I just went up to that corner, and next thing he's on my inside. They caught me off guard, so I was a bit disappointed with that. But P3 was a fair result.
Great stuff.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
George.
Before we move on, I just wanted to pick up on Toto Wolff and what he said post-race, the boss of Mercedes. Did he have anything to excuse the decision that he made, that the pit wall made?
Not really. What he did do was really praise George Russell in his defence of Lewis Hamilton. Yeah. And look, George did an incredible job of holding off a very fast Lewis Hamilton behind him. You can argue that George came on the radio during that race when this was all playing out saying, why are we doing this? Why are we swapping positions? Is Kimi going to go and win this race? The reality was he didn't go and win the race. I don't think there was any real opportunity for him to close down the 11-second lead. So from George's point of view, he's thinking, well, why don't you just leave it as it is? Kimi can defend me from behind and we can take a double podium here. They're kind of exonerated by the fact they did get the double podium, but they made it very, very hard for George. I think the reality is Kimi was so much faster than George Russell. Even if the team had just said, look, fight it out amongst yourselves, I don't think George had any defence for Kimi at that point. It has still been in the clutches of Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, and still Kimi, as you said, would have got past one way or another just because the pace of that car looked amazing. And that just makes me think, the pace of the car. Kimi's got it. George hasn't. Does that come down as a driver to something psychological? Why can he not find the pace in the same car?
It's a difficult one because there's multiple factors that could be in it. It could be one of those where Kimi's driving style just suits the car that's underneath him better. Whether or not Mercedes has done that on purpose and designed the car around him, I don't see why they would, with him only being a second-year driver. But Kimi clearly feels more comfortable in the car. And they're in equal machinery. There's no difference in the upgrades that they have between the two of them. It's not as if Kimi had extra upgrades coming into the weekend or has over the course of the season so far. But in that same interview, words after the race, Toto Wolff said he felt like it was damage limitation for Mercedes this weekend, saying that he felt that like Lando Norris was the quicker car this weekend in the race overall. And Mercedes couldn't really do anything about that apart from take home the best haul of points that they could.
Yeah, I agree that I don't think Mercedes were the quickest car. I would argue that there's a chance here that Ferrari were the quickest car, but they were so far back in the pack, we never really got to see it. And I think had the Ferraris managed to do a better job in qualifying, I think they've got a really fast race car.
Yeah.
We saw it at times, certainly in the hands of Lewis Hamilton, but I think if we get a situation where the Ferraris can find themselves on the front row, certainly at a racetrack that suits them, they are a very quick car. But Mercedes, look, they did a really solid job in the end. A double podium is a great team result.
Absolutely. Talking of Ferrari, where do you think they should have done better? Could they have got pole? Was that not on the table this weekend?
I think that's the difference, right? You've got differences in the cars, in the way they deliver their performance, because we've seen the likes of Kimi Antonelli, George Russell all weekend be very, very quick, particularly George Russell over one lap. Lando Norris has been super quick over one lap. The Ferraris not so much. So they haven't managed to either look after or prepare tyres. They were taking 2 laps at least to prepare their tyres for a qualifying lap, where others, Mercedes and others, were just using 1. So Ferrari are finding it hard to get tyres into the right temperature, particularly this track, which is a short lap. That will hamper you in qualifying, particularly. In the race, of course, that's a much easier task to do. You've got a long 72-lap race today. So the Ferrari has different strengths to the likes of Mercedes, and I think their big strength is a Sunday. Lewis Hamilton qualified 5th yesterday, but was actually really positive about his chances for the race because he knows he's got a quick race car. But once you're in the middle of that pack, you get hampered by traffic. Your race strategy is always compromised. They need to find a way to get themselves on the front row.
I think that's been Ferrari's Achilles heel of the season. That's been their biggest issue, because once you start on the 3rd or 4th row on the grid at tracks like Zandvoort, where it's so difficult to overtake at, and it was shown in Monaco as well, once you start further back in these races, you're already on the back foot going into Sunday. Yes, that's going to have a big impact on the actual overall strategy that the team are able to operate with the cars and the options that they have. But mentally, you're also on the back foot because you're fighting a losing battle at that point.
Yeah, it does make your Sunday incredibly difficult if you have to fight your way through a crowd of people, particularly on a track that's hard to overtake on. So, every team is now looking for developments to bring to their car. It's not just about absolute lap time. It's about what are your weaknesses? Where do you need to improve? Ferrari need to improve on a Saturday.
And when it comes to Ferrari and Hamilton, at one point we thought he was going to go for the one stop and the win was there for him potentially. It wasn't to be, and he had to change onto the soft tyre at the end. But he did a really good job of eking that tyre out, and that was the difference possibly, I think, between him and Leclerc being able to fight.
Yeah, and I take my hat off to Ferrari for doing that, because quite often we don't praise Ferrari for strategy over the last
Very
few
rarely
years.
do we, ever.
Yeah, it's that's right. And I hate sort of criticising any of the pit walks because it's a really tough job. But they were bold. They were bold in the sprint where they put Charles Leclerc on the alternate tyre to everyone else around him. They were bold today in doing something different with Lewis because, like we just said, when you're 5th and 6th in the middle of that pack, it's really tough at Zandvoort to work your way forward on pure pace. The overtaking opportunities are few and far between. So the alternate way to get to the front is to do something different. And they did that, and it nearly worked. Lewis Hamilton gave the leaders some big questions to answer. And I think, a sign of them doing something that was really making people keep an eye on them very closely was that all of the leaders had to look at Lewis Hamilton, his pace coming through the pack on that long stint on a soft tyre, which I think he got 24 or 25 laps, maybe even 26 laps on a soft tyre, which was an incredible achievement, with pace still, to then go onto a hard tyre, which gave him the option at least of being able to go right to the end of the Grand Prix, or at least very deep into this race. And it made everyone up front stop and look at him. They had to react their strategies to him.
Well, you say that it was bold for Ferrari to take that split strategy in the sprint, but there wasn't really as much jeopardy in the sprint race. The max points you can take home from a sprint race is 8 points if you take home that victory. But everyone else going on the mediums, Charles Leclerc going on the softs, Ferrari then had that data going into Sunday. They know what position the tyres would be in after 24 laps. And that's how Hamilton was able to do those 25, 26 laps and still have pace coming out of the softs. Yes, the one stop was theoretically possible going into this weekend. I don't think it was ever plan A in any minds of the teams.
Apart from Aston Martin. But we'll come on to that. we can't go too soon on that. And Charles Leclerc, for the first time I think ever, I heard him defy team orders and not move out the way for Lewis Hamilton. And Lewis is not happy with that. He reckons that cost him, and that cost him dearly on the podium because he couldn't get past it, lost them time.
And he might be right, because it was so close in taking that final podium position for George Russell. Lewis had to sit for one extra lap behind his teammate, and there's no doubt it held him up. So the team asked Charles Leclerc to pit. It wasn't the optimum strategy for Charles, but it was for the team because Lewis was the man on the move, and he was the one that had a chance here. So they asked Charles to pit. It looked at least like he refused and went round for one more lap before eventually pitting in, and that meant that Lewis was just hampered by a small amount. It's difficult to know whether it really did make the difference, but certainly Lewis will have that in his head now that it definitely did. In the end, because of the late sort of virtual safety car and the late flurry for another set of tyres, Charles Leclerc had an extra set of fresh soft. He was the only one to do so. He put brand new softs on for the very final stint, and actually he had the fastest car of the race for the closing laps, closed right up to behind Lewis and almost got the position back. So swings and roundabouts, they'll pick it apart at Ferrari, I'm sure, but those little things get into a driver's head, and Lewis will now be thinking, if only he'd done what he was told, maybe I'd have had a podium here.
Interesting debrief for both Ferrari and Mercedes. I wouldn't want to be there. But more importantly, I wouldn't want to be Max Verstappen. Very rarely do you see him make a big mistake. He sometimes spins, does a nice 360 maybe, but this time, lap one, he barrels into the white line. Kai, just describe what happened, because it was a mashup, wasn't it?
Well, I think it was most surprising because it was Max Verstappen. I mean, he's known as a driver that has impeccable car control, but through 13 and 14, you described it perfectly on the broadcast, Mark. You have the cars in IndyCar, in those championships, you have the high and the low line. It was the low line which Verstappen went for through corner. 13 and 14, through those 19 degrees of banking. That's not going to work in your favour. It's a tighter line. There's more load on the tyres and there's a bigger requirement for grip. Verstappen hit the accelerator through turns 14 and quite frankly, on that wet surface of tyres, the rear's just completely rotated, dipped a wheel onto the white line as well, which doesn't have as much traction as the tarmac. And then it was just a passenger. It was a passenger ride into the wall for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you said it was a big mistake. It was probably a small mistake with massive consequences, wasn't
that's
it?
True.
Because he was just a few centimetres too far to the right, in reality, in touching that white line. They're so slippery when they're wet. Anyone who rides a motorbike on the roads will have learnt all of that when they got their licence. Stay off the white painted lines in wet conditions. They are like an ice rink. And at those speeds, you're flat out through that bank corner. In those treacherous conditions, you've only got to brake traction by the tiniest amount, and you are, like Kai says, a passenger. And it was huge. It was like an aeroplane crash. There was debris absolutely everywhere.
Sad way for him to sign off on his final Dutch Grand Prix.
Yeah, it really was, wasn't it? I mean, with all those fans, I mean, it didn't stop the party atmosphere. It never does with the Dutch fans in those grandstands. But yeah, they would have wanted something special to sign off with. I don't think he had the car to challenge the leaders this weekend, and that was a real shame for him and them. But it would have been nice to see him in the mix. And on one of those chaotic weekends, you can never write off Max Verstappen, right? So if he'd been in the mix, he could have thrown a cat amongst the pigeons.
325,000 people attended the Dutch Grand Prix for the final time. But I've just had a look at the scores. Max Verstappen is now, I think, 130 points off the lead. He'll never make that back, will he? Is he finally out of contention?
We said that last year, didn't we?
Exactly.
Okay, move on. On the other side of the garage, Liam Lawson stepping in for the injured Isaac Hadjar. It should just be one race that he misses for Hadjar, but he did a really good job. Finished in P7. Thank you so much. My notes only finished at P6 because I then ran out of time. But yeah, he did a really good job. Solid.
Yeah, it was Liam Lawson's best result as a Red Bull driver. Obviously, only had that couple races previously, but yeah, best result for Liam Lawson in that second Red Bull seat. Was able to take home points, P7. Good for his drivers' championship, and also good for Red Bull. They know that they can rely on him to step up to the mark when they need him to jump into that second Red Bull seat. Whether anything happens over the course of the seasons with Isaac Hadjar or an issue for Max Verstappen, they know they can now rely on Liam Lawson.
Yeah, he beat Max Verstappen, didn't he?
Well,
there's not many second
Even
Red Bull
I could have
drivers
done
that can say that. The records will show he beat Max Verstappen.
That is true. Noticeable performances. I'm going to do a couple of shout-outs if you don't mind. The first one, Hülkenberg. Nico Hülkenberg scoring points, which is great for Audi, but also his reactions off the spin of his teammate Gabi Bortoleto on lap 2 when Verstappen spun out, and Hülkenberg then proceeded to go through smoke. You describe it better than I can.
Well, I described it in commentary like a scene out the F1 movie because it was that dramatic. You know, what he did was he went into a cloud of smoke, couldn't see anything beyond the smoke, and then the smoke cleared, and his teammates perpendicular across the track. And I don't even know how he missed him. It must have been millimetres. I mean, pit stop for a change of tyres and underwear, I think, if you're Nico Hülkenberg in that situation.
Very good. And the other shout out, Andrew Benson isn't here, as you can see. So it falls to you, Kai. A shout out for Fernando Alonso,
Well, you
please.
better do this justice
Yes,
in the
please
absence
do.
of Andrew Benson.
Don't put all the pressure on me now. I've already got the race out of the way. I thought that was supposed to be the hard part. No, I think everyone in Spain will be dancing through the streets tonight. Fernando Alonso taking home a second point scoring finish of the season. The first of those obviously being that P10 in Monaco, but taking home 2 points this time. So Aston Martin now 3 points to the count. They'll be down at the second last position in the Constructors' Championship, but they've got points on the board. They're making improvements, and that's exactly what we want to see from Aston Martin. It was almost a lost cause right off the season in the first few races, but with that new upgrade to the powertrain from Honda, and those upgrades on the front wing as well being brought into this weekend as part of the Budapest package, we can finally start to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, they've definitely taken a giant step forward, but that is really easy to do when you're that far back, isn't it?
Right.
But, I don't want to take anything away from them because they are now at least in the mix, certainly in the hands of Alonso. They're in the mix of that midfield, and it gives them a platform to build from. This is the first step of those upgrades. You've then got to figure out how best to deploy them. There's so much optimising to do, particularly on a power unit side in 2026. When you bring a big upgrade, the first step is getting it into the car, getting it on track, doing some laps. They're the only team running this power unit, of course, from Honda. So the amount of data is limited. This weekend will have been invaluable for that. But I think it's hopefully a platform for them, a springboard in which they can develop from and hopefully start increasing their performance as they move up the grid.
And they are my shout out for strategy as well, because a one-stop, making it work when no one else really could, and his teammate Lance Stroll ended up stopping, I think, 4 times. So converse strategies, but well done to the pit wall, because on a day like today, Mark, your pit wall and your strategist especially can make the massive difference.
Yeah, huge. It's one of those moments in Formula One where you kind of love it and you hate it as a team member, because you do get the opportunity to really make a difference. And particularly if you're a midfield runner or somewhere down the back, when you don't really have an opportunity to win the Grand Prix, chaotic conditions give you the chance to do something different, like an alternate strategy. You then need the pit crews, you need the driver to execute it all very well, and they did all that. So, look, it's hats off to them. They played a different card to everyone else, made it work, and they've come away with points.
So, talking of heroes, who is your hero of the day? Let's start with Mark.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome.
I mean, this is boring, isn't it? I'm going to say Lando.
Oh, it's boring.
It is, isn't it? But Lando.
Your work here is done. Kai?
I'll say Fernando Alonso. I think it was an outstanding drive from him.
I was going to say the same.
There
we just need to keep Andrew Benson happy. That's the key role.
That's the only reason we said it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just want a little look ahead. The producer's going to kill me, but a little look ahead, because Monza is up next. The home of Lewis Hamilton, Kimi Antonelli. I can't even begin to think how long it's been since we've got a win for an Italian in Monza. You know it?
Well, no, but
you
on
both
that,
know it.
no, I don't know the stats. I'm
Come
terrible
on.
with stats. But looking ahead to Monza, it's not great news for Kimi Antonelli, because we heard this weekend that he is almost certainly going to take power unit penalties, going to take grid penalties going into his home race, which was also why it was so important to do well this weekend, of course, to bag those points when he had the chance. Next time out, he's going to take new components to his power unit. They've had all sorts of reliability issues, and they're doing it strategically in Monza, because that is a place where you can overtake with a new power unit. So that's why they're choosing to do it there. But of course, it's also his home race, which is a tough challenge for him to start from way further back on the grid.
But does it take the pressure off his shoulders by doing that?
Yeah, a little bit.
Little bit. And is the pressure on Lewis Hamilton then?
Oh, I don't think the pressure's on. I think the pressure's on Ferrari full stop. They finally got a competitive car, and they're competitive for race wins. So I think Charles Leclerc will be feeling it as well.
Well, my thanks to Mark and Kai for joining us this weekend. It's only 2 weeks until the Italian Grand Prix in Monza. Can't wait. Will we be reporting on a Ferrari or a Kimi Antonelli win, or can Lando Norris make it 3 for 3? Join us then.